English language teaching under the covers.
Hello, welcome back to ELT Under the Covers, ELT React. In this video, we are going to be following on from our series with Hugh Dellar, and we're going to be looking at him, Hugh Dellar, teaching online via Zoom. So that's going to be an interesting one for today, but let's jump into introductions. I'm Neil of Teen Teach fame, and I'm joined by an online master, Professor Rich.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again. And did you know that the skill of using harmonica, and I didn't realize this actually, but the skill of using a harmonica is being able to play it without playing multiple notes. You know, everyone always plays it and they all kind of go, and that sounds very nice. But actually, apparently the pros, they can do the kind of
one note at a time.
one note. There you go. Yep.
Always teaching. One note rich.
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, I'm an educator. I need to educate. So I'm excited. It's our new best buddy, Hugh, and I'm excited to see this because not many people have put on these online classes, have they? They haven't put them online, and they haven't put them on YouTube. You know, and we've been doing online classes for, you know, well, forever, for ages, but throughout the pandemic, obviously it took off and it's got really popular and all the rest of it. And we were speaking, weren't we, with Anita the other day, and I'm not sure if that video is live on the channel just yet, but I imagine it will be, won't it? Or maybe it won't be, actually. Maybe this video will be first. But we've got an interview with Anita Draskowski or something. Sorry, Anita.
Doretsky.
Yeah, Doretsky. Yeah, that's it.
I got it right.
She's a bit of a pro, isn't she, in online stuff? Or that's her area. And you know, we in that discussion we had with her, it kind of came up this idea that, you know, there's all this online teaching going on, but a lot of people just haven't really got a clue what's going on in other classrooms. It's not like before where you could kind of peek in through your colleagues' windows and see, ooh, what weird little activity are they doing? And then sat together in the teaching room saying, hey ho, I like the look of, I like the cut of your jib in that little fancy class that you were just teaching. So what was all that about? You know, why was there a student doing a handstand and someone dressed as a monkey? You know, tell me about that. But now we don't know. Now it's like the mystery box. Like in some institutions, you might not even know, you might not even meet your colleagues because you're just working online and your classes come your way and you do what you do, don't you? So we're going to get a little bit of an insight into this Pandora's universe. Courtesy of Mr. Dellar.
Yeah, I felt like he would be a good place to start, and also a continuation of our series with Hugh Dellar, because we've had previous video where we looked at his in-class teaching using his lexical approach. We've had after that here the interview with him when we would just kind of talk about this lexical approach and his approach to teaching in general, and this is kind of like the cherry on the top of that Hugh Dellar cake, because we can look at him teaching online so we can see how and maybe compare to how it's different to him teaching in class. And you know, if you are watching this and you are looking to get some feedback on your classes, you know, send us a link with your video and we're happy to take a look and you know, give our thoughts, because one of the things is key, and one of the reasons why we do these ELT reacts is because observation helps with reflection and helps you become a better teacher. It's definitely helped us, and let's jump in.
You should see some kind of picture like this. Yeah, have a quick look at the picture. Have a quick think about what you think's happened, okay? What do you think it's a picture of? What do you think it shows? What kind of news story it was? What do you think's happened before it was taken? What do you think maybe happens afterwards?
Yeah, they're great, these activities, aren't they? I love these. I love using pictures in that way. I think it's amazing at just how much conversation you can generate using pictures. I remember.
Was it that old saying where it's a picture says 1,000 words, and you know, it's kind of for I know it's cliche, but it's kind of for us is a picture gets your students to say 1,000 words.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there can be a lot to say about it. And I remember there was this book. I mean, back in the day, I remember when coffee table books were a thing, and a lot of them, they involve, it's all about the big pictures, isn't it? They're like this big book with nice pictures. That's basically what a coffee table book is. And I remember there was one called something like the 100 Greatest Photographs of All Time or something. And God, I hate to imagine what the version of it would look like today. It would be so messed up. But this was like back in like the early 2000s before the world went crazy. And it was really interesting. I remember going through it and just like, I remember one time just talking for hours with other people in the room about this book. You know, I was just like, that's brilliant. And then later, after becoming a teacher, obviously, you begin to discover the power of photos and pictures and discussions. And so some of my favorite classes revolve around that kind of idea. There's another coffee table book, which is it's called In Character Actors Acting. And it's by a photographer called Howard Schwartz, who invited Hollywood actors into his studio. And then he tells them to be a certain character and then takes a photo of them. And it's really interesting because, you know, you'll get stuff like, okay, you're a 9-year-old boy at the dentist, like responding enthusiastically to the dentist's request to say, open your mouth and say, ah, right. And you've got like Peter Dinklage doing like his best version of that, right? And it's very cool, yeah. And it's brilliant for the English class because, of course, you can get them to say, you know, what do you think's going on there, kind of thing. What does he look
it's a good
like?
prompt.
What does he seem like? What does it seem as if he's doing? So that's another one. So, you know, what Hugh's doing now, obviously, it's a teaching classic, isn't it? Take a look at the picture. And then, you know,
and it blends into multiple approaches. It's not, you know, he blends into his lexical approach. It blends into kind of Jamie Keddy's dialogical storytelling. It's pretty universal, and I kind of see it as like the writing prompt for speaking. It's a conversation, you know, prompt. It's a conversation starter. And if you're a savvy teacher and you see a book like the one you described by Schwartz, then you can go, these have a general theme around these photos. I can use this. And that's one of the great things about using authentic materials and having a teacher mindset is seeing something that you can kind of go, okay, I can scaffold around this, which is great. But to be honest, I had the ultimate coffee table book. I don't know if you remember it. It was the Big Book of Birthdays, and it told you like a whole bunch of stuff that happened on your birthday and kind of like what your person, you know, like all these different tarot readings that you could have, or the gems that you have, you know, like the best, you know, what was number one in the charts, all on like one page. It was great, but that's an aside. I'd love to turn that into teaching.
It didn't have pictures.
No.
Oh, okay.
But these books are very much, you know, a lot of the conversation prompts come from these teachers, from pictures, though.
Yeah, no, you can still make interesting conversation.
Okay, what kind of headline might you give it? Is this the kind of thing you like to read yourself? Why not? Are there any other kinds of stories that you prefer to read? And do you think there's enough positive news in the newspapers or in whatever kind of news streams you consume yourself? So I'm going to rely on Anita to stick you into breakout rooms, ideally groups of 3 if that's possible.
Oh, so he jumps between the different breakout rooms.
Sorry to drag you all away from the part. I feel slightly guilty. So from listening to a few different breakout rooms, most of you were correct in guessing that these were miners. Any idea which country?
Bolivia, Colombia, or something like that.
Chile.
South America, yes.
Latin America.
South America.
You're close. Yeah, it was actually in Peru.
Peru.
And most of you were kind of correct in guessing that somehow they were underground for a long time, and then they somehow got out. Any idea how long they were underground?
A few days?
Couple of days.
A couple of days. I heard a few people saying this. Keep guessing.
A week.
Keep guessing.
A month.
They look. We didn't look so that it's
Yeah,
2
a few
weeks.
hours, maybe.
69 days. 69 days.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so there were
Oh my
9
God.
days.
miners in Peru, and they were basically trapped underground for 69 days, and all 33 of them somehow managed to survive.
Yeah, what did they eat?
I think they managed to somehow get food down to them.
Ah, okay.
They couldn't work out a way of getting them out, but they could work out a way of getting food and drink down to them. So kind of crazy story. So a few bits of vocabulary. Can you see the shared screen there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so most of you were guessing, I think they must be miners who've been underground. I heard quite a few people saying locked.
Trapped.
Yeah,
Trapped.
yeah, not locked. Locked is always like locked in a room or locked in the basement. Aliens are trying to concentrate us.
Yeah. Somebody has.
Right, so at least two different things to talk about there. One of them being his correction activity, which, okay, so I like the fact that he's taken chunks of language. Now, these are obviously teachers, not students, so it's a little bit different to what it would be in an actual classroom, but okay. So he's taken these chunks of language from their conversations, and he's presented them not by presenting the error, so to speak, but he's actually clipped the error out and just said, what's the best word to go here? Now, I quite like that. I always think the very basic way of presenting delayed error correction is to just write the errors on the board and say, fix that kind of thing. And I think there's something to be said for that, but that's like the kind of ABC of delayed error correction, isn't it? Whereas I really do like these kind of things where you can do something a bit different with it. And a lot of my activities, they involve maybe just a little bit too much prep, which ends up in me, especially in a one-to-one class, frantically typing away and thinking while talking to the student to try and put together my kind of complicated delayed error correction, like jigsaw, word sentence matching activity or whatever. Whereas this one actually is not going to require a great deal of that, is it? You just need to write down what they've said, but then clip out where they've made the mistake. And I like that bit. Now, let's go to a little bit of criticism here. And I haven't taught group classes online, so I don't even know if this is valid, but from my perspective, I would definitely, first of all, have students muted. I think I don't think I would want everyone kind of shouting out like that on a live call. Also, the question is asked openly, and I think Hugh is kind of a bit of a fan of that, actually, because we saw that also in his in-person class. So maybe he likes it because it's kind of an authentic way rather than having that teacher-student nomination thing. But really, I think I personally would nominate, or I would say, okay, everyone, take a look at these sentences, talk in your groups about what you think is the best word for each gap. And then we feed back afterwards. So we go, okay, group A, what do you think for this one? Group B, what do you think for this one? Something like that, just to stop it being the loud, talkative one who gets to answer all the questions. And also then the second issue is we've got that kind of noise in the background, which again, it's a technical thing, really. I think they should be muted or at least when something like that happens, the teacher should be there muting them. I think Hugh is kind of using a moderator, isn't it? So his moderator should be muting them.
I mean, maybe if he was the moderator himself, it might be something that he would do, like mute or something like that. But I think that's one of the things that kind of really jumped out at me with this class is not so much the teaching, because it is very much how it was when he was teaching in person and we watched that. It was more the technical aspects of it that you don't think about, but actually are more of the problem. So, when those students were talking, that the voice range, some were a lot louder than the others, and it drowns other student voices out. So I think nomination is going to be key for that, to make sure that everyone kind of gets their turn, or at least it's an organized go around, because if you're just like talking over each other, it's going to be the person that's got the loudest mic, basically, that wins through. So it's funny that's, and I wonder if there's controls in Zoom, or that would be something that they would look into with Zoom to do that, to be able to like control people's levels. Or it would be something, I'm thinking more for myself, dealing with children, as to ways to control that for them. Like, could you mute them or lower their levels, or something like that, or at least at the beginning of the class do a test to make sure everyone kind of see how people's levels are and stuff, or just kind of go over this and actually integrate that into part of the class.
Yeah, I think that I don't think Zoom has that feature, actually. And audio features do tend to be a little bit complicated, although it is something that it would be a nice feature to have, especially on group calls, to be able to, within Zoom, control the kind of volume input that's coming from each person.
Yeah,
that would definitely be quite helpful. It is a complicated thing though as well, because it's not just the technology, the microphone, and whatever weird audio settings each person's got, but the headphones also come into it. If someone's got the volume on their headphones turned right down, then it's actually probably kind of easier to talk over people.
Yeah,
because
you don't even know. It might not be the case that you're purposely doing that. It's just...
Yeah, that's it, right? Yeah, you kind of feel, it might feel like they're sort of giving way because they sound so quiet, right?
Yeah, and so, I feel like, with these online classes, it looks like you might have to do a lot of front loading in terms of giving instructions at the beginning to kind of let students know these are the rules of the class, in that, where, like at the beginning of the class online, you might have to say, so I'm going to be teaching you, and we're going to have breakout rooms, and when you want to talk, maybe you raise your hand and I can nominate you to talk or answer or something, but please don't just randomly shout stuff out or what have you. If you have something to say, raise your hand, I will unmute you. Kind of just like these guidelines, because I feel like one of the big issues with online classes is there's no kind of established decorum. You know what I mean? So, I believe the onus is then on the teacher to decide, how is this class going to look, and how is it going to be run, and how do I need to communicate that to the students? So I'd be interested, people out there that have been doing these extensively over the pandemic, kind of what do you do? Do you like set up class rules or something like that? How do you go about that? I'd love to hear that, and write some comments in the section below, or send us a link to your video and we'll have a look at what you do.
Yeah, I'd love to have a comment on someone's online teaching video,
because it's like it's like classroom management, isn't it? Right. So
you can do mine at some point.
Dun, 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 dun.
Right. Okay. So I don't know. Should we skip ahead? Because I think we know what's going to happen through this. Should we skip to the sort of the next?
Yep.
activity?
Let's skip to the next activity.
There's quite a lot of discussion here.
Well, let's have a little bit of the discussion.
Fraud charges. Yeah. So it's usually you're arrested, you're charged with these things. You go to court. They find you're not guilty. You've been cleared of all charges.
Mhm.
Yeah, so it may be like that. Okay, and police take $10 million drugs in house raid? Seize. Okay, sounds a bit more dramatic. And anything else that the police might seize during a raid?
Guns.
Yeah, okay. You know, so they often kind of, they seize a huge stash of guns.
Drugs.
Oh, money.
Money.
Oh, it can also be money as well, yeah? Yeah, I mean, usually it's drugs, guns, or money. Yeah, sometimes all three, I guess. Okay, and win brings Boca, it's a football team from Argentina, to the point at which they can win the league title.
So brink.
Yeah, brings Boca to brink of league title. Yeah? And anything else you might be on the brink of, apart from on the brink of winning the league?
On the brink of disaster.
Yeah, can be for negative things as well. You know, it's how I'm feeling a little bit ahead of the general election tomorrow. Yeah, so it can be for negative things.
Did it land? That didn't land, Hugh. Sorry.
Yeah, on the brink of a nervous breakdown. No, it's how most teachers feel as you get towards Christmas. God, I'm on the brink of a nervous breakdown. But it can be positive things as well. So, you know, on the brink of victory. Yeah.
I think it's
risky
important to point out as well is I believe all of these have the book with them. So they're going through the exercises in the book, and you just don't see that. If you didn't have the book, I would have thought that there would be one panel, one square where they have the actual, book.
Yeah, that'd
shared.
make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they got the book with them, or maybe these are some sentences that he dictated, and we skipped past it. He might have like dictated headlines and then said like, "Now I want you to try and make them sound more dramatic or something." That's what it seems like the activity is. To me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we had some someone's child bopping around in the middle.
Yeah, that was pretty funny, right?
Another element that needs to be considered with group classes, something that I haven't come across because, well, actually, I have had students' children pop in, but obviously the student themselves, the parent that is there, so they tend to be like, "Oh, say hello, hi," and then off they go, kind of thing, rather than that sort of thing where someone's gone to the toilet or something, which is more likely to happen, I suppose, in sort of a group class.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the other issue is politics, and I'm guilty of this sometimes. Mentioning it, I think you've just got to avoid mentioning anything to do with politics, because whatever you think is the way that politics should be, and therefore, this is the right result, this is the wrong result. You have to think that in the majority of countries, at least 50% of the population don't agree with you. In most democratic countries, then the people who win the election tend to get about 35% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think you have to have. Well, I think it's always a difficult thing to sort of talk about, isn't it? Mind you, he didn't.
What is the saying or something? Dinner conversation: no politics, religion, sex.
Yeah, maybe.
Money.
Yeah,
but
I don't know. The thing is, I don't know if. Well, it's not about it's not about the conversation, but it's the fact that Hugh was okay actually, because he said, I'm feeling this way about the election, but he didn't actually say kind of why or which way he was going with that. But I noticed that someone there on the stream kind of crossed their fingers like this. And then there was this kind of sense that, yes, of course, everyone's going to be hoping for XYZ results, And then you've opened the door, haven't you? And I've done this sometimes on my live streams. Like, I make kind of an offhanded comment about politics, and then suddenly people are saying stuff like, "Oh, do you think Boris Johnson should resign?" These are like the students on the live stream, right, or whatever. Or someone else might say something else. Do you think that mask mandates are ridiculous? Whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'm instantly like, oh, I've got to get off this topic immediately.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, got to just completely shut this down because, yeah.
I mean, I do touch politics in my classes, and I don't have a political stance, but I do very much early on teach about devil's advocate. So whatever stance they come out with, I will just instantly do the devil's advocate, because there's always two sides to it, and it's just, as long as you can balance talking about something and holding 2 points of view, I've never really found it to be much of a problem. But it's for many people it can be quite emotional, and that's always the point where you kind of go, okay, we'll put a pin in this and we've got to go back to the activity, back to the exercises. So there's always that excuse.
I completely agree with you, Neil. I think that's absolutely the way to handle it. I think that's completely the point. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at there when we said, no politics, no sex, no religion. Actually, I would say, yes, you can talk about all those
at the same time.
Yeah, I think you can talk about all those things in the communicative language classroom, and probably have a good time doing so. And I've mentioned before how, treading the edge of spicy topics is something which I think can generate a lot of discussion, especially with teenagers and groups like that. They absolutely love it when they get to talk about something a little bit edgy. But the way to do that, obviously, is you're presenting yourself as, first of all, as a neutral sort of director or a neutral facilitator. And then if your opinion comes into it, it's like you say, devil's advocate is the way to go. So see which way the whole class goes, and then kind of push against them a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely what I do as well. And I think that is the way to go about it.
Yeah, sometimes it leaves you on an unfamiliar or unsteady side of, or maybe an opposing side of to what you normally would be on. If it's, for example, politics, but
all the time,
it's just a teaching. It's just a teaching technique for me. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, but yeah. Well, you're kind of quite neutrally minded anyway. Yeah, but absolutely, I have some opinions about things, and I've 100% argued for a position that I completely personally don't agree with in classrooms, and that's important. Actually, you can see the importance of that, because you're challenging the robustness of what people think they know. Because I've heard, for example, especially teenagers, they learn all the time, and some of the reasons they come up for why they argue for something, it's like,
it's pretty lame, isn't it?
That's not going to wash in the real world. Yeah, exactly. So you're like, no, and then you give them the response and let them deal with it. And to be honest, I do get the impression that Hugh's actually quite good at that. I think yeah. To be fair, he's rolled off it. I think my point wasn't particular. I think I'm just making a general point here about being careful about politics. Yeah, but no, I'm not saying anything about Hugh in particular. I think Hugh's probably actually my sense of Hugh is that he probably manages it in a similar way to the way that we do, or you know.
What do you think? What do you think of this little activity as he's going through it like this now? You know, because one thing that jumps out at me is it's a lot of teacher talk time, and you know, it's kind of a bit of a is that something that we should be having?
Well, if I remember rightly, that was his way of teaching in person was quite sort of teacher talk timey, but that was a small group, wasn't it? It was like 4 students, so there was a bit more interaction. Whereas here, he's got so many teachers that because he's training these teachers. He's got so many people that maybe it kind of pushes it a bit more towards a teacher-centric thing. I think you could also argue that at the end of the day, he's demoing activities for teachers, and therefore it would probably be a little bit too synthetic to, you know, start doing like extended lexical activities with them. I mean, it already seems a bit weird, doesn't it? He's like, sees, which means this, you know, and he's telling people who clearly know because they're English teachers, right? Yeah. So yeah, I think I can understand that. I think it's probably just the situation, actually. But as for other comments about the activity in general, well, this is his whole lexical approach thing, isn't it? And it's like developing the language, you know, what can we use with that? What can we use with that? And I like it, actually, but I don't do it as extensively as he does. He spends a lot of time on this kind of activity.
Yeah.
You know,
he likes to get them to, he likes to really do a lot of eliciting and getting people to, you know, come up with, oh, what else can you seize or what can you not seize? And just, you know, like he does a lot of, I wouldn't call them CCQs, but he does note and point out that you know, how the concept could be used, you know, positive, negative, that sort of thing.
Well, he does do CCQs, and then he combines them with questions that come under the banner of this idea of demand high.
Yeah.
Have we spoke about that before? Where this is where, like, in a weird way, it's kind of similar to CCQs. It's where you have something, and you sort of get the student to develop further with it. So, you know, a word like seize comes up and you're like, okay. And then he said like, oh, what else do you seize? And that's like, that's kind of a demand high area, because then you're saying, right, so you know what seize is, you've suggested it as an alternative for this newspaper title. Now tell me what else you can seize, right? And then you might say, and what's a synonym of seize? And who does the seizing? And, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I guess you're kind of like, you've got your central spider and you're like pinging out the different web lines to connect it to all the other different spiders in the world to make a complicated web network of spiders.
Yeah, but the other in your brain, that's what you're doing. That's what you in the students' brains, right? Because you're connecting the neurons, aren't you?
Yeah.
So, okay, so it means that, and it connects to that, and you use it with that, and some students know this bit, and some students. So it's like this complete knowledge thing. But the other thing about demand high is it just pushes people a bit. So rather than just being like, oh, you know the word seize, okay, well done, tick, donk, you know, maybe they do know the word seize. Maybe they've been using it for 10 years. Maybe they've known the word seize for ages. Maybe they're a specialist in the word seize. Well, let's push their knowledge and find out. And that's one of the things about demand high is like, the idea is to prevent a class from being just completely below a student's level. Because sometimes in communicative language teaching, it's hard to tell if, you know, students are really learning. They're really learning anything. You know, let's just come out with it. Sometimes it's hard to tell if they're really learning anything.
Yeah.
You know, so demand high has this thing of like push them a bit to see how well they know this thing. Let's get to the edge of their knowledge of it, and then we can teach them something. You know.
Yeah. Well, I would say this would be kind of if we were to put this under ESA umbrella, for example. We've got the photos with to engage. This is kind of the study part. So I'm interested to what would his activity be for, like activation for them, because he's loaded and demanded high of all this new Lexi. So, how is he going to get them to use it? I think that's the logical progression. That's what I presume would be the next activity. But, maybe we can skip to that.
Well, let's have a look. I don't know if he's doing it as a connected class, because actually I can't really see how this. Okay, yeah, they rated some. Okay, so we've got a bit more of a practicey activity going on here, I think.
Towers.
That was a terrorist attack where they flew an airplane into the buildings.
So it wasn't a blast, yes, finally.
I've got an example. One of the participants of the conference where you took part as well, ELT Trends, wrote on Facebook, the conference was a real blast.
That's a different meaning.
Yeah, I can imagine, but it's a blast.
So if you say something was a real blast.
So I have an example.
Go on, tell me.
I was telling it in our discussion. I was saying it in our discussion that a friend of mine used to live in Chelyabinsk, and several years ago, meteorite fell near Chelyabinsk, and the blast broke my friend's windows. Is that the right usage of blast?
It is, but that's a different kind of blast again. You can say that the blast or the noise or the impact broke the windows. Yeah, I remember the Chelyabinsk thing.
So we've basically got it, like, as I alluded to before, Hugh really likes his lexical vocabulary expansion, doesn't he? And they're still doing it of one form or another here. So yeah, that really is his thing. And I guess, there's an argument to be made here that, well, he does it in a communicative manner. So, there is communication going on. I agree that personally I would like to see some sort of discussion based upon that, and maybe with actual students he would do. I feel like there's something missing here with his explanations. So he's explaining these things about blast, and he's just doing it entirely verbally. And I just feel like, for me, this is the kind of thing where I'd really want to pull up a whiteboard. And it might just be that this was in 2020. So maybe it was at the start of the pandemic when everyone was still getting to grips with Zoom and stuff. And there's no whiteboard, he's just sharing directly Microsoft Word. And I don't think, you could do it on Microsoft Word, actually. He could go into that and do it. But at this point, because we've now had 3 meanings of the word blast, and we've got all the students teaching, which is something that we pointed out a bit of an issue with before, that you'd want to control that a bit more, I think. Mm-hmm. I would really want to separate those meanings now very clearly, because you're definitely going to get people in this call now, especially if there were students going, hang on a minute. So wait, we had one blast, which was what? Then we had it's a blast. And then this is a different kind of blast. And to be honest, I didn't really understand what that student just said anyway. And now Hugh has to somehow explain all 3. So, we can play on. And I think he's just going to verbally do it because he's dealing with English language teachers and maybe doesn't have to sort of clean up the mess quite so much. But in an actual class, I would be like, okay, full stop, get up the board. Here we go. Blast. 1, 2, 3. And let's get it very clear what these different blasts are and how we use them and all the rest of it.
I feel like it's a missed opportunity. I think it's one of those things where you're and this is probably what can help people by watching these sort of things that we do, is it might prompt them to do something a bit different. So, for example, with this, he just goes into explaining it verbally, right? And not putting anything up on the screen, but by us saying, well, it would actually be clearer for the students if you were to put, even just on Word, blast equals explosion, blast equals, having lots of fun or something like that. And to visually show the separation on Word, I think is very valid. But also, you can use images. If he's sharing his screen, you easily just Google, this is a blast at the windows. This is people having a blast at a party. and it's just in the moment you don't think about it. And if you're kind of like an advanced teacher as well, maybe you don't do as much reflection, so you don't go, oh, actually, if I'd have just shown it, I wouldn't have had to kind of got into that explanation. It wouldn't have got all those 3 examples, because that it starts to build up over time. And it just reminds me of back to that interview that we had with Jamie, where they were talking about owls. Do you remember? And they all had this idea of an owl, and I think it was like they had the idea of like a snowy owl, and he was trying to tell them about a tawny owl, like the barn owls or something like that. And I think he eventually just showed them a picture on his phone, because he just couldn't explain it, and they just couldn't mix it up. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think one of the things here is I'm seeing you've got Zoom, and he's treating it very much just like he's got a whiteboard. And I think, why can't we do more with that?
Well, it's not even like a whiteboard, is it? Because there's no drawing capability in Word. So, yeah. I mean, I think with a whiteboard, it'd be easier to like do. And the other thing is, he's not, because remember when Hugh's actually in a physical classroom, he boards quite a lot.
Yeah.
But here, he's just kind of typed it out, and he's working with them verbally instead, rather than.
And he could easily just edit this up and just add it. Add a few things in. But maybe he's just not thought about doing something like that. But I think I see it a lot when I've researched these Zoom classes and watched a couple of people's videos as well. It's just like the screen's just left hanging, and there's no teacher on there. There's no new information. So, and it's just there. There's this whole box of really useful things that you could use, that you could just grab from, but no one seems to use it.
Yeah, totally. I'll have to, I'm going to start blowing my own trumpet in a minute, but I'll have to show you. Well, we'll have to do a thing on one of my. I know you're going to rip it to shreds anyway, but we'll have to do an observation in one of my classes sometimes, because I have to say, that's something that I'm kind of good at.
I totally believe you.
Yeah. Grabbing little bits and bobs that are related off the internet spontaneously. Yeah, I'm not too shabby with that, actually. Anyway, so moving on from that, I'm not sure if we're going to get the A activity of our.
Well, let's see the last part and see if they do an activate, because this just looks like prompts or whatever.
Okay.
It starts so well, and it starts in a kind of good way, and then it just goes Wah! I guess, I've no idea, to be honest, but it makes sense to me as a metaphor. Starts well, collapses at the bottom. Anything else you wanted to ask about? Any other vocab or anything looked at that you're not sure of? So,
Hugh, could you please clarify something about pull out of? So we worked with ladies, so with this verb. Can it be used in the passive form? Somehow I was pulled out of anything. Is it about negativity if I use it in a passive form?
I've never heard it in the passive form.
Really? Because it sounds like to be used in the passive form for me,
Maybe
active.
Is it the?
You couldn't you? It would.
I mean, I think he's talking.
He was pulled out eventually.
It was. I think a lot of the stuff that Hugh seems to say it's not if you could use it in a passive form, but if you would,
Right.
usually, or if it was commonly used that way, I'm advocating for him right now.
So the troops went into they went into the they went into the neutral zone. They took point. We had control of it, but then they were pulled out. God damn it!
So
we were pulled out. Why weren't you there, Rock? We were pulled out. Okay.
So I was actually thinking, well, what could you do? Like, I mean, right now it's just kind of, you got the end of the class and it's suddenly become, it's just open. Anything else? There's clearly not going to be an activate section. Yeah. So I was thinking, well, what could be the activate portion of this? What can be the freer open practice or what have you? And just off the top of my head, piggybacking off this idea of headlines or something like that, why not just give them some time, either do it in groups or individually, for them to come up with their own headlines or what have you, and then they individually do little short news bulletin presentations, something like that, with their own headlines, and it's kind of like fun, it's cheesy, it's a little bit cringe, and they could go through each one, and at least I know it's not open practice, but at least that you get to see them producing, and maybe they could all rate their own news channels or what have you. But that's something that came to mind. But it's the activate part. Apart from putting everyone in breakout rooms, how would you really tackle that with doing something like this on Zoom?
Yeah, I think breakout rooms would be the way to go, actually. I think, first of all, disclaimer, I think probably the main reason why Hugh's not doing something like that is, I would expect, that the fact that it's teachers.
Yeah.
And, well, what's the point? Because I've actually been in inset training sessions where teachers have done it like that, and they've done like a kind of a PPP style inset training session, where the production activity is, the main rationale for it is to get to use the language in a discussion. And it's like, I just don't think there's any, unless you're teaching someone who's never taught language class before and you want to demonstrate to them what a freer practice activity is, I don't see any utility to doing that whatsoever.
What I was thinking, though, like with that idea of them doing their own news bulletin headlines, is then they could have, rather than him stepping in and doing errors, they could have peer reviews or something like that, where other peers could be like, oh, I don't know,
Oh, no, but that's good. Yeah. That kind of activity is fantastic. But, to go back to what you were saying, breakout rooms, I think, would 100% be the way to do it, because he looks like he's got like 20 students there. So I don't think there's any way that you want all of those talking together. That's not going to work at all. So it'd have to be breakout rooms. The idea of having a kind of arbiter who sort of makes notes of what they think are errors and stuff, it's really good, that kind of thing. You just have to have ways of managing the workload, because what you don't want is a situation where the teacher has to kind of run about looking at all the corrections that someone's made and rubber stamping them individually. That is a nightmare. You're setting yourself up for a lot of hard work in a short space of time that you might not even be able to manage, because there'll be too much of it. If you can't, it's difficult to be the teacher who's teaching the little mini teachers all at the same time. So what you really need then is, you need to come up with some way of managing your little error correction czars there. Mm-hmm. And there are ways of doing that, which is, for example, after everyone's had a go at it, let's say you say, each person should make a note of a maximum of 4 errors. Right. Mm-hmm. And then when all the people in each group have done that throughout their little discussion about whatever it was, right? So it was newspaper headlines, wasn't it? The obvious thing with newspaper headlines would be get one group to write some fictional headline, 3 fictional headlines, make them as kind of weird and wonderful as you can. And then they swap those headlines with another group, and the other group has to talk about those headlines and say what they think the story would talk about and what it would say. So then they're discussing, they're using the language, producing the headlines, and then discussing the language and interpreting it. And then you do your suggestion of you have your mini teacher in each group who listens, writes down 3 or 4 corrections, and then, you know, the alarm goes off, do, next one, which I think you can do on Zoom, actually. You can kind of send a signal that's like, okay, now change to the next person. So everyone has a go, ding, ding, ding. Then you've got, let's say your groups of 4, so you've got 12 errors per group, 16 errors per group. And then the group themselves will look at those errors and talk together about them and decide whether they're errors or not, right? And the ones that you're confident about, or that there's a majority, you know, you're kind of like, okay, that's an error. And the ones you're not, so the ones that there's a majority that it's not an error or that it's correct already or whatever, and you cross those out, and then put a question mark by the others. Okay, and then you've cut down the teacher's workload.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the teacher can kind of go around, have a look, and sort of see, right, what have you got? What have you got? What have you got? What have you got? And depending on the quantity, then you can make a judgment call of whether you're going to just pick the kind of common ones or the ones that frequently come up, which would be the smart thing to do, depending on time, or whether you're going to cover everything comprehensively, which is the less smart thing to do, but which I've done millions and millions and millions of times, because it's just the kind of thing that as a teacher, you just sort of fall into it sometimes, don't you? You just go into kind of the autopilot mode where you want to correct everything, and that's what you end up doing.
Yeah.
But it's probably be better to be selective and choose the common errors, so to speak. And there you go. That would be that. I think that would be the way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Yeah, it's brilliant. Just off the top of your head. A wonderful
collaborative
example.
Collaborative effort, wasn't it?
Watching his in person to his Zoom class, it's the same. It's the same thing. The thing that, and I said it when we were looking at the video of the Zoom class, is I feel we're trying to reproduce what we do in the class with what we do on Zoom, and if it works in class, it works on Zoom. That's fine. I just feel there's just a part of me that feels that there's missed opportunities, and you know, I think you have more to say with this because you utilize the tech more in your classes. So, you know, is there anything that you could kind of speak to that as to, you know, with you, like your experience with teaching offline to online?
So, yeah, you mean kind of novel or interesting ways of using the technology in online classes? Yeah. I mean, to be honest, that was the kind of thing that I really wanted to get onto with Anita. And
we did touch upon it, but
we did touch upon it, but it wasn't quite as mind blown as I expected. And it makes me think that perhaps there aren't quite as many revolutionary things going on as you might think. And this is, of course, the issue that education always has with technology, which is that technology comes in, everyone's using it, and what happens is you end up with a classroom with 16 iPads, and they're all getting used for like 5 minutes of Kahoot at the end of the class. And that's how that incredibly expensive technological device gets used as basically a voting panel for a quiz game recap, you know. And I really feel like that's kind of the thing that happens a lot with tech, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's probably what's going on with the teachers. And you sort of think, well, what weird and wonderful and creative ways can you use stuff? And I'm not sure that I've really discovered any which are too outside the box. I think obviously there's some very interesting stuff you can do with recording, which I've done. I do quite a bit of audio recording, and sometimes that'll be a part of homework for them to listen back to it. And I think just kind of because it's so easy now to audio record. In the classroom, it was obviously really clunky. It's like, and it's so like icky, isn't it? Because someone has their mobile phone and it's how they hit the record button and blah, 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 you know, and people get kind of on edge. But then online, you can kind of just do it, and it's people just kind of forget that they're being recorded in a way. And then you can kind of say, right, have a listen to this. And they actually really get to hear themselves. And I think that's always a useful thing for a language learner to do, is to listen to a recording of themselves, whether there's any, however else you'd want to use that activity, you know. So that's one thing. And then there was the thing you were saying about grabbing stuff off the internet. So obviously this is amazing now. And there's a shortcut key in Windows, which is Shift, Windows key, and S. Do you know that one?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you know what it does?
Search?
No.
No.
That's just Windows key and S.
Oh, yeah.
So Shift, Windows key, and S. Mm-hmm. It allows you to clip a portion of your screen to the clipboard as a screenshot. So it's not a full screenshot, it's just a portion of the screen, right? Mm-hmm. And I use it all the time in my classes. It's probably the most common key combination that I press, or probably just even the most common keyboard thing the most common thing I use my keyboard for is probably that. Mm-hmm. All the time. Because using that with something like Google Images or just anything, even text from a website, because it's quicker than copy and pasting the text. So like because also when you copy and paste the text, you get all this weird formatting and stuff and it doesn't work. Yeah. But with that, you just get clearly what you can see and you can just boom, straight away, put it on your whiteboard and the students can see it. And using that with Google Images, it's so quick, you know, because you just go bang, 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 Google Images, and then you've got your Shift, Windows key, S, and then you just paste it in, because it clips it automatically. You just have to choose which portion of the screen you want to clip, because it just comes up with like a box, right? And I think the tool is called like Snipper or something. And there's a
yes, yeah.
If you're not into hotkeys, then you know now these days you can just click a button and do it. But I still use the hotkey because I find it a lot quicker to do it like that. That's brilliant for doing what you were talking about, which is that you're kind of using the internet and then presenting exactly what thing you want to present to your students. I'm not just going to flood you by sharing my browser window and what other nasty things from the abyss of my browser window might then
search history.
Which might then
autofill
emerge
my web address
from the what was midgets doing?
What's a xylophone? X. What's that web address?
Oh, I see you have an interest in animals. So the emergence from the abyss of whatever might be in the teacher's browser window. Instead, you can just clip exactly what you want. You put it into your shared window, which is your whiteboard, and you've got that. And the other thing that I would say, which is probably the most, I think you have to wrap up pretty much now, don't you? So the other thing I would say, which is probably the most, the thing that I sort of touched on a little bit with Anita, and I don't think she really resonated with it. So, or maybe she did actually, maybe she did say something about it. But I for me, it's a massive thing, which is the fact that with this screen sharing, you completely control the student's visual field. And it's a power that in a classroom you don't have and probably will never have, or certainly not for a long time, not until everyone's wearing like Google glasses in class or something. Mm-hmm. But it is a power. It's a lot of power, like to be able to just go, boom, this is what's now on your screen, you know? Because funnily enough, you don't have an option to say like, no, I don't want to see what they're sharing, you know, it's unless you leave the call, you know, and it full screens it as well. Mm-hmm. Like Zoom, it full screens the screen share automatically. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, you're going to see this now, you know, and that can be actually a massive help for teachers, because it's no longer like drawing a crappy little stick man in the corner of the board and saying, oh, can you see what he's doing? Look what he's doing. No, now I can just be like, look at this image. And it's like full screen on your monitor. And it's very, very clear what I'm talking about then, because it's like, there you go. Right. It's right there. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a lot more to be said for that. And I don't think I'm even using that to its full extent. But I think there's definitely a great power there as an educator, especially for explaining, for trying to communicate the knowledge that's in my head to the students about something, which you traditionally call teaching, and is a little bit of a little bit controversial in language teaching, because we like students to discover and stuff instead of that. But sometimes it's useful to just go like, hey, look at this picture. You know that thing we talked about before? That's a blast. They're having a blast. Big picture of a party and everyone's having fun. And it's there, you know. So that's probably one of the main things that I would say. And then, there's loads. I mean, Anita was saying there's 1,000,001 tools that people are using. I've only scratched the surface on that. I mean, I've got the tools that I like. I think they're very flexible. I'm certainly interested to see more, but I'm aware that I think there's a lot of gimmicks out there.
Yeah, and that's the issue, isn't it? It's balancing out. It's moving to the utilizing too much technology where it becomes that is the reason for the class, almost the gamification, whereas it not being using it as a tool. And I think it really just comes down to if it makes something that you're trying to achieve more efficient. Does it reduce the time that it needs you to explain? So like when he's talking about having a blast, is it easier and more efficient and more time-consuming, time-saving to give the explanation or to show a picture? So I think that's the same with all of the other technologies. Is trying to find, is it really necessary? Could you do it another way and maybe just lose out a little bit on whatever technology thing it brings to you? Or it's like a cost benefits analysis a lot of the time with this tech. But I'd like to see it used more, because otherwise, what's the difference between in class and online?
Yeah, the thing that I really want to do, and I just have not had the cojones to do it yet, is just literally play a video game in class. And I have students who are into games as well, and just come up with a way of playing a video game where, like, for example, they have to communicate. I'm controlling the game. They have to communicate what to do, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I actually think it'd be really enjoyable, and I think they'd really like it. But the thing that worries me is just that idea that, what am I paying this teacher for, to play video games, or whatever.
Well, that was something that Anita brought up, was when we talked about this element, which is like, well, if you are designing the activity, that's your portion of being the teacher. That's what you're being paid to do. You're being paid to design this activity. Yeah. Otherwise, they're just playing video games without any sort of guidance, right? The objective is to just play the game. But if you're doing it through you, then if you're a good teacher, there would be a reason and not a learning objective for that.
Yeah. I mean, totally. And, it is one of those things where it's a big problem for anything that involves sort of expertise and creativity, but you can't necessarily see the sweating that goes on behind the scenes. I remember the first job I ever had the second job I ever had was a car valet for a restaurant, which involved parking cars and then getting the cars and giving them back to people when they come out of the restaurant. It's a very expensive restaurant. And this job was really made off the tips. The hourly rate was absolutely appalling, but the tips could be massive. So what you always did in that job is when they came out and asked for their car, here's my ticket kind of thing, you absolutely peg it. Like, you run like so fast, right? Yeah. And of course, as soon as you get around the corner, you just start walking. right? But when while they can see you, you're pegging it, because if you don't do that, even though it probably only makes the difference of like 10 seconds to how fast they get their car. Because, the car parking was just around the corner, it's like everyone would get their car in less than a minute, right?
Yeah.
But no one would get it faster than 20 seconds, 30 seconds, but it's just the fact that they see you, it would increase your tips because they'd see that sweat. And, there's that element, but we're kind of going a little bit off piste here, aren't we? But you're right. This is what we talked about a little bit with Anita. And I think it is an issue that somehow you have to represent how much hard work has gone into something. I know that a lot of industries have this problem now, like artists online really, they struggle with pricing, with pricing themselves up and, that kind of stuff. Can you really say all this work's gone into this thing? And then you're like, well, it's $200. Oh, but it's just whatever, an image or whatever,
Yeah.
Anyway, it's another topic for another day, I feel. Unless you don't have to go in like 10 seconds. Is this not cutting into your schedule?
Unfortunately, it is. So we are going to have to wrap up. But it's been an interesting discussion and an interesting video to watch. And if you are out there and you are teaching online and you've recorded some of your classes on Zoom or what other video platform that you use to teach your classes, and you want us to have a look, send us a message at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com or leave us a comment below. If you're looking for more of my materials, more of my stuff, have a look at www.teamteacherchina.com for some PowerPoints that you can download and use instantly in your classrooms, maybe even in your online classrooms, because they can be very interactive. And we have a Team Teacher China YouTube channel where I actually show you how to use some of those materials along with other videos. Team Teacher English, where I take those video materials and put them into videos for self-study, and Team Teacher Baby, where I take my experience as a teacher and put that into parenting. And Professor Rich.
Yes, so you can find me at youtube.com/Professor Rich for teaching purposes. You can track me down on LinkedIn for professional purposes. You can email me, email us, in fact, at eltunderthecovers@gmail.com if you have anything you'd like to contribute to the show. You can do a little search for my new project by searching for POG UK, which is going to be a gaming previews, commentary and content channel, which is getting launched in, to be honest, it's probably a bit soon to be announcing that, but it's going to be launched about a month or so. And also I occasionally stream on twitch.tv/ProfRichGaming.